When a business dispute arises, the first reaction is often very simple and predictable. We look for someone to blame. Well, not a company name on a paper, but a real person, perhaps a director, or shareholder, or perhaps just a normal worker, anyone who has the power to make decisions. But company law deliberately stands in the way of that natural instinct. One of the most fundamental principles of a company law is that company has its own legal personality separate from the people who control it. This separation allows individuals to conduct businesses, take risks, and innovate without being personally liable for every failure that happens in the company. However, this protection is not absolute. Doctrine of lifting the corporate veil represents a narrow and carefully controlled exception. It allows the court, in exceptional circumstances of course, to look beyond the company and hold individual personally responsible where the corporate structure has been abused. So, rather than talking randomly, let's take a look on a decided case regarding this matter. In the case of Fixes Construction SDN BHD and K&E Design Idea SDN BHD and another 2024, the High Court was asked to decide whether a director could be made personally liable for the alleged failure of his own company. But that is not my job for the day. I will now hand over to my fellow presenter who will outline the relevant facts of the case.
Move to the fact of this case. The plaintiff Fixes Construction Sdn Bhd is a private limited company. The first defendant, K&E Design Ideas Sdn Bhd, is also a private limited company incorporated under Malaysian law. The second defendant is a director and a shareholder of the first defendant company. On 15 July 2020, the plaintiff appointed the first defendant as a contractor for an upgrading project located in Kuala Pilah, Negeri Sembilan. The contractual relationship was formalized through a letter of award issued by the plaintiff to the first defendant. The second defendant was not a party to this contract and did not execute the letter of award in his personal capacity. Subsequently, the plaintiff alleged that the works carried out by the first defendant were defective, incomplete, and failed to comply with the agreed specification. Notice of complaint were issued and the first defendant alleged undertook to rectify the defects. The plaintiff further claimed that it had made several advance payments to the first defendant, resulting in an alleged overpayment of Rm 1,582,943.36. On this basis, the plaintiff sued the first defendant for breach of contract and sought recovery of the alleged overpaid sum. In addition to its claim against the first defendant, the plaintiff sought to hold the second defendant personally liable by requesting the court to lift or pierce the corporate veil. The plaintiff alleged that the second defendant was the alter ego of the first defendant, exercised full control over the company's affair, and had made assurance and representations that induced the plaintiff to award the project and make advance payments. It was also alleged that the second defendant had promised but failed to provide a personal guarantees. The second defendant applied to strike out the claim against him under Order 18, Rules 19 of the Rules of Court 2012, arguing that the claim was unsustainable as he was legally distinct from the first defendant. The High Court allowed the application, holding that no fact were pleaded or proven to justify lifting the corporate veil, thereby reaffirming the doctrine of separate legal entity.
So hi everyone, my name is Nur Amrasha Zurmitin Nasruddin. My microphone number A204769. So for my part, I will explain more about the legal issue and legal principle in these cases. For the legal issue, the main legal issue in the case is whether the plaintiff could pierce the corporate veil and make the first and second defendant jointly and severally liable, or whether the claim against the second defendant was unsustainable and should be struck out. So for the legal principle, we refer to the under Section 20 of the Companies Act 2016. A company has a separate legal personality from its shareholder or director. So this means that the company is responsible for its own debt and obligation. For under Section 21, it is stated that a company can sue and be sued in its own name. Normally, director and shareholder are not personally liable, but however, the court may lift the corporate veil only in exceptional situations such as actual fraud, fraud in equity, or where the company is used to evade the existing of legal obligations. So for the court decision in these cases, the High Court ruled in the favor of the second defendant and struck out the plaintiff's claim against him. So however, the court allowed the case against the first defendant to continue because it was the contracting the party. So for the court reasoning, we follow the principle of case solid investment. So the court found that no evidence of fraud by the second defendant lobbying with a contract as a director does not amount to fraud. Second cases is Gurbachan Singh, so where the court held that the first defendant was not created to defraud the plaintiff. At most, the company was a poor contractor, so not a fraudulent one. And the third one is the case of Ong Liu Chiu. So the concealment principle did not apply because the plaintiff already knew the second defendant was a director and shareholder. So lastly, the evasion principle also failed because the plaintiff had no independent legal right against the second defendant personally. So in the conclusion, the court reaffirmed that the pursuing the corporate veil is exceptional and without fraud or abuse of the corporate structure. So director cannot be made personally liable. Therefore, the claim against the second defendant was struck out. So that's all, and I will pass to the next reporter to explain more about these cases. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ilham again, and I'll tell you the court decision, but instead of the same old boring me, I'll let my AI version do it instead. So what did the court decide and why? In Fixes Construction SDN, BHD v Candy Design Ideas SDN BHD, the High Court was asked a critical question. Can a company director be personally liable for the company's failure? The court's answer was no. The High Court ruled in favor of the second defendant, who is the director of the company. The plaintiff's claim against him was struck out entirely, and costs were awarded in the director's favor. However, the court allowed the lawsuit to continue against the company itself for breach of contract. The reasoning behind this decision is rooted in a fundamental rule of company law. A company is a separate legal entity from its directors and shareholders. The plaintiff argued that the director controlled the company and acted as its alter ego. But the court made it clear that control alone is not enough to lift the corporate veil. To hold a director personally liable, there must be clear evidence of fraud, deception, or abuse of the corporate structure. After examining the facts, the court found no fraud, either in law or in equity. There was no proof that the company was created to deceive the plaintiff or to avoid legal obligations. At worst, the company was simply a poor or inefficient contractor, and that does not justify piercing the corporate veil. The court also rejected the use of the concealment and evasion principles. The plaintiff always knew it was dealing with a company, not the director personally. There was no hidden identity, and no independent legal duty owed by the director outside the company's involvement. Because none of the strict legal tests were satisfied, the corporate veil remained intact. In short, the director walked free, the company remained liable, and the court reaffirmed that limited liability is strongly protected under Malaysian law, except in truly exceptional cases.
So we have come to the end. In conclusion, the case of Fixes Constructions Durian Berhad and KAE Design Ideas Durian Berhad and another illustrate a strict manner in which Malaysian court uphold the doctrine of separate legal and personality and their general reluctance to lift or pierce the corporate veil, particularly in the context of commercial dispute like this case. The High Court decision reflects a consistent judicial approach aimed at preserving certainty and stability in company law, in line with principles enshrined under Companies Act 2016 and also previous established federal court judgment. The ruling reaffirmed that company is separate legal entity distinct from its shareholder and director, and that liability cannot be imposed on individual merely due to their control or involvement in the company's affairs. Importantly, the court emphasized that corporate veil will only be pierced in exceptional circumstances, such as where there is clear evidence of fraud, sham transaction, or abuse of corporate structure to avoid legal obligation. Mere dissatisfaction with company liability to meet its contractual obligation is insufficient to justify the lifting of the veil. Ultimately, the case strengthened the judicial consistency in Malaysia and underscored the limited and exceptional nature of piercing the corporate veil in commercial litigation. That's all from us. Thank you.